Hello, everyone. I'm Charlie, and welcome back to another DraftKings DFS Slate breakdown. Apologies for the slightly later Slate upload, just because my power was out all day. It actually just came back on, so now I finally got the opportunity to bring the people the content here. In terms of the slate itself, it is the second batch of first leg UCL quarterfinal ties. We've got Barcelona Benfica, Bayern Leverkusen, and PSG Liverpool, with Bayern as the slight leading favorites here at -130, and then Barcelona slightly minus odds as well away at Benfica, and this PSG Liverpool game as pretty much a toss-up. In terms of projected lineups and set pieces, for PSG, I think it'll be mostly Kvaratskhelia. Dembele did see some sets finally in like the first time in like 3 months last game. Of course, there was no Kvaratskhelia starting because they were rotating for this game, as well as Dembele starting on the wing, which I don't know if that's a factor. Like he has not taken at all when he's played like as the number nine. Other guys who could end up maybe having a share though, are like Hakimi, Nuno Mendes, all have taken some free kicks. Nuno Mendes taking some corners a little bit lately too. For Liverpool, McAllister is probably the most likely, but Alexander-Arnold, Szoboszlai, Robertson have all taken as well. So neither team really has a super set routine. So I don't really think you can target sets too much here. And I think you more kind of focus on just the good players here, of which there are really plenty to pick from in this game. Bayern and Leverkusen. For Bayern, if Kimmich is healthy, he should split with Olise or potentially even have like a majority. The only thing is that he has been out with an injury or illness, I think maybe. And when he wasn't there, it was like an Elise monopoly, which was super interesting. So that's just one thing to watch out for. If there's no Kimmich, Elise's spot or like stock rises pretty exponentially. And then for Leverkusen, it should be Grimaldo mostly, maybe Wirtz with a bit of a split. If we see like Alex Garcia in here, he'd be the one splitting with Grimaldo. So that's another thing to watch out for when lineups drop. Barcelona and Benfica. For Benfica, it should be Kochku and Akartolu splitting. And then for Barcelona, it should be mostly Rafinha with potentially Pedri taking a couple of one-offs, maybe even Yamal taking a couple like short too, but mostly Rafinha. And prices. Salah still the kind of the big name forward on this slate, despite not having the best goal scoring odds. Like Lewandowski and Kane are both minus. So if you want to go purely off that, you could maybe say Salah is slightly overpriced, especially with the tougher matchup. However, 10,400 is not a terrible spot for him, I don't think. He's definitely in play just because he's just been so good. However, my favorite forward here is Rafinha. He's been just Mr. UCL all season, gotten goal contributions in every game bar two. And in terms of DraftKings floor, almost every game has had 15 plus. And we go back to that game they played against Benfica in the league phase, 40 bomb right there. So I'm very much happy to build around Rafi, despite it being such a stacked forward slate. And if you're going him, there's really a ton of options to pair. Like you've got Salah, we talked about Lewandowski's not a bad play. Dembele, I can't really argue against with his form recently. Harry Kane at 8,400 feels like kind of underpriced potentially. I know he kind of burned everyone last game getting subbed at halftime, but I think he's back to full fitness now. And I don't really see any reason that he should be this cheap despite that poor game. So, like, that's a super in play forward. Kvaratskhelia is not bad for potentially a monopoly set taker in a game that could have a ton of goals. So there's just a ton of ways to go here. That's just like the top end. And then there's like some insane bargains down here too. I'm not gonna say every forward, but like Akertolu at 5,200 seems cheap. And then the like really insane candidate is Luis Diaz at 4,500. Like he's been 2K more expensive at his lowest. And like I said, a game that could have a ton of goals, like 4,500 is just crazy here. It's just whether you want to go down there for the savings or whether you want to go a more safer option, like maybe a Kane or a Salah. But there's just so many ways to go at forward here. Like even Rafinha, who I like a lot, I will not be having like in every team in GPP, like I sometimes have with my traditional core plays. Like there's just so many ways you can go here that Rafinha will probably still end up my most owned guy, but I'll have a ton of different combos of all these forwards. They're all super interesting. Like Yamal too, I didn't even mention. So many ways to go. Midfielders. If there's no Kimmich, Elise becomes like an auto play for me. Otherwise, he's probably more of a fade, I feel like. Like Kimmich will last Champions League game against Celtic, he had almost all the corners. Like Elise barely took anything. Only had how many crosses? Four in like a game where they were dominating the whole time. So I'm a little bit scared of that, frankly, if he starts with Kimmich. And Kimmich himself, like I think is okay, but I just don't know if he gets the upside here in a slate where I think there could be a ton of goals with all these teams here. Musiala, Vierts, I just don't think they're in great spots in cash. I just don't think the floor is there. Olmo, just don't really love. Coach Goo, I think it's a tough matchup. So there's just not a ton of super interesting mids like there is for forward. Like Shabbo, if there's no McAllister, he maybe has a chance of splitting. I could get there potentially. McAllister, that is the set piece taker. But once again, not a super concrete set situation. Not a ton of upside typically, although he has chipped in with a couple of goals in the past. So I could see it. And 5,500, this is probably my favorite midfielder, but not a lock by any means here. I think he's just a not bad play. But there's yeah, just no one who's really jumping out at me. Other guys I'm considering in terms of more bargain value, like Pedri, if you want to gamble on him taking a couple of set pieces, also some upside potential there for Barcelona. So that's not awful for that price. And then there's just not a ton else here. So like maybe you're forced to go a Kimmich or Elise just because there's just not a ton of options. But like I said, there's just not a ton of super appealing guys down here, or really in here in general. Defenders, there's a bunch of guys who used to be just wagons, but now I think there's a little bit of red flag across the board for everyone. Like Hakimi, it's a tough matchup against Liverpool, and he's just not had the same amount of floor that we've seen from him typically. Like he had these assists 3 straight games, and all of them he didn't have a crazy score anyway. Like when you see like a fullback with an assist, you expect for 20 points, I'd say, just because you'd assume he had like 10 floor. Hakimi hasn't done that. He's had pretty tough matchups lately, and when the matchups get tough, PSG don't dominate as much, and Hakimi just doesn't get as many points. Since he's not like a serial crosser like you see with these like elite DFS fullbacks. He gets her like in shots and key passes, and though you don't really just see those racked up as much, especially in even games. So he's still solid because he has that upside. But like I said, the floor is lacking there, and it's a little bit scary against a very strong Liverpool side. Grimaldo, same thing. He's been elite, both for upside and floor when he's at his best. But he's not been crazy against Bayern when they've played them in the past. And it's also an away leg for them, which you're a little scared of too, since it's the onus is on Bayern to get the win, and Leverkusen would probably be happy with a draw. Saying that though, if Bayern get a couple of early goals, Leverkusen start to go for it. There could be a path where Grimaldo starts to put up some of these crazy numbers that he has, and especially where he ends up playing, like he's pretty high up the field, especially in this lineup with both him and Frimpong in. He's probably like one of the most attacking players in this lineup, it's like being a fullback typically. So because of that, like you've got a potential of having some upside too. So I like him more than Hakimi. He probably is the best defender on the slate, especially at price, but he's just not as much of a lock as he has been in past slates. Like he's not playing like who has he played with a ton of points before? Like is that Sparta Prague, I want to say, or whatever that the ACS is, had 25 points. Or Brest, he was solid. Milan at home, Feyenoord. These are all better matchups than this, so his logs are a little bit deceiving. And I wouldn't be surprised if he drops like a 10 or even like an 8. But even then, that feels like an 8 with a lot of potential, rather than like your Hakimi who could drop like a 4, or like an Alexander Arnold who could take nothing, get subbed at 60 and drop like a 6, let's just say. So yeah, like I'm scared of all these traditional like super solid defenders. Grimaldo's probably the best, like I said. But there's like Simicas, Roberts. Where's Roberts? Robertson's super down there. So there's an argument for like a more of a bargain pivot over these kind of traditionally elite defenders. I could get behind a Robertson here. The worry just is that Simicas comes in, and that's a little bit scary to think about. But at 4,400, that's not bad. Then like these guys in between, I don't have a ton of love for really any of them, frankly. Like Inigo Martinez is wildly overpriced for a center back despite his just ridiculous logs. Like I don't think he's gonna continue getting goal contribution every game. And then in terms of guys lower than Robertson, who I'd consider, this Dahl guy is super good if he starts. He usually takes when he plays. He just has not played really much in these big games, so I just wouldn't count on it. But that's just something to watch out for if we see some miracle lineup with him in. And then I think you're almost just down to CB punts. Like, who are guys that I'd consider? Like a Kubarsi as like a floor and passes typically. Yeah, like look at how many passes he racks up here. That's a little bit of something to you can count for 2,600. So I don't mind that as a play if you're going all the way down here. Van Dyke, not been his best offensively this season, but like he's always good for a goal just because he's so tall, so powerful in the air. And if we get like a set piece, right, play him with like a McAllister for a goal off of a corner kick, you're chilling for 2,600. Like this is a price that Van Dyke hasn't been all season too. So it's another guy who just feels like a bit of a misprice here, despite his poor form, at least for DFS. And there's just not a ton else. Like you can kind of play whoever you want here in terms of defender. I think there's arguments that can be made for any of them, as well as some downside. And then goalkeeper, absolute crapshoot, as I always say, and it's been even more the case for these UCL slates. In terms of a core, I'm starting with Rafinha. I'm probably just going Grimaldo here, just because I think he's got the best ability to not screw you. I'll just say. I think all these other defenders could be really big traps, or they could pay off. Grimaldo feels like just the yeah, like I said, least likely to burn you. Then in terms of one more slot, it's really tough here. Like I don't really love any of these guys. Like I said, I don't even love my core particularly that much either, just because of how many pretty good plays there are on this slate. But right now, I'm leaning towards having a Harry Kane in core. I might change that, maybe go McAllister, especially if we see Robertson over Simicas. For whatever reason, I just feel like Robertson takes a little bit less. But it's really tough here. Like there's a ton of ways to go, ton of pretty interesting options, and really just comes down to purpose at the end of the day. But yeah, guys, that'll be it, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.